It is Wednesday, August 13th, and we're going to talk about those times where it feels like we're stuck in the same issue and it feels like we're tapping over and over again without making any progress. Welcome to Wednesdays with Gene. I am the eponymous Gene Montrastelli. Every Wednesday we show up here live. These live streams are sponsored by the Tapping Mastery Academy, where last night we actually had a really amazingly powerful session where we talked about and tapped for being visible for about 2 hours, and we had a really, really awesome conversation about all of that. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about those times that we feel stuck, because oftentimes when we feel stuck, it's actually a misperception about being stuck, and we're going to talk about how we can engage with that, how we can get over that, because when we feel like we are stuck, we are less likely to come back to this tapping tool over and over and over again. And you'll notice over the course of the last couple of weeks on the live streams here, over the last couple of weeks on podcasts, and it's going to continue for a couple more weeks, we're just talking about those places where there's friction for us to start. Because once you're tapping, it's great. Once you're tapping, you know what to do. It's that first beginning start, getting it going. So we're going to talk about one more way to make it easier for you to do all of that. But like always, as we start out, before we jump in, we want to transform our resource state. We want to put ourselves into our body. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a little wordless tapping for about 1.5 minutes. So all I want you to do, just tap inside your hand, take a nice easy deep breath, and just move from tapping point to tapping point in the order that makes sense to you. And as you do this, just notice and witness what is going on in your body. And if there's some tension or heaviness, just notice it. Again, don't do anything diagnostic. And just be present and just be aware. And make sure you scan your whole body, not just your upper body, or not just your head, or not just your heart. And if you're inspired to break out of the normal tapping sequence that you're used to and go somewhere else, trust your instincts. Just let your fingers do the walking. Nice big stretch. Maybe give it a little shake. If you got some water nearby, make sure you're constantly sipping water. Lots of value in drinking water when we are doing all of this. Awesome. So before we jump in and we talk about tonight's topic, just want to go to the calendar really, really quickly. Tomorrow or next week, this time, same channel, we're going to show up and we're going to talk about how to tap with compassion. And it's about compassion towards ourselves. And when we extend compassion towards ourselves, how that's going to transform the way that we tap. And then 2 weeks from today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about tapping for creating emotional momentum, so that we continue to come back again and again. And then starting on September 7th, more details coming. Don't worry about that. But we're going to do the 30 Days to Tapping Mastery once again, which will give you a chance to walk through some training every single day with some reflection questions, with an amazing community to gather with and reflect with. And we'll be going live every single Saturday to answer your questions. It's one of my favorite programs. We do it every 6 months because I love it so much. So watch this space for more details on all of that. Awesomeness. So let's talk a little bit about coming back to the same issue over and over again. And so oftentimes, the reason why we feel like we're coming back to the same issue over and over and over again is because the issue that we're tapping on today rhymes with the issue that came up before. And so what happens is we end up flattening our description of our experience down in such a way that we think we're talking about the exact same thing. And so let me give you an example. So let's say I am afraid to speak up. Like that's the issue I'm working on. I'm afraid to speak up. And I am struggling to speak up in my family. And so I do some tapping on that. And maybe I can speak up around my family. Maybe it's that one time. Maybe it's more consistently. Then I get to work and I'm struggling to speak up. And so in my description, I'm struggling to speak up. I am using the exact same words to describe it. And since I'm using the exact same words to describe it, it's really easy for me to think they are the exact same thing. But there are these huge contextual elements that come to speaking up. Yes, I am doing the same thing. I'm having an idea inside of my head that I think is important, and the words are then going to come out of my mouth articulating that particular idea. So it feels like the exact same thing, except all of a sudden I'm in a new context. Yes, I'm around humans, but the way I perceive my family is different than the way I perceive myself at work. Or at home, I could be speaking up about a personal need, where at work, I could be speaking up about a health need that's impacting the way that I work. And so again, I am speaking up and I'm stating a need, but because the needs are different, the context changes. So we're in a circumstance where it feels like I'm tapping on the exact same thing. And, we talked a lot, Gary talked about this as introducing tapping to a lot of us, this idea of aspects, and the aspects are all of these different pieces, parts to it. A great way to think about those aspects are the context in which we're experiencing something within. So that's idea number one, that it's important to recognize that it feels like it is the same issue when sometimes it's actually a different issue that we have just given the exact same name. Another example of this is there are certain emotions that we experience that no matter how much tapping we do on them, we're going to experience those emotions again. So when we're dealing with fears, oftentimes fears are things that we're able to transform. Recently I was working with a client who's very afraid of snakes. Now she is no longer afraid of snakes. And so we've taken emotion, we've transformed it because it's not about the emotion, but it's about the context. And for her, a snake is a snake is a snake is a snake. So they're all contextual, assuming they're behind glass, assuming they're not holding it, whatever. But it's now safer in that particular way. Overwhelm is completely different than that. So the information of overwhelm is, I don't have enough resource to complete what is in front of me. So when I have a lot of things on my to-do list and I have a deadline, I feel overwhelmed. That is just my system saying, hey, we're short resources right now. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough energy. We don't have enough support. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough competency. And so we feel overwhelmed. It's our subconscious mind saying, hey, be careful. This could go really, really badly. And when I am tapping for overwhelm, I might tap for overwhelm 17 times in one day. Because what happens is I look at my to-do list, I'm overwhelmed, I do some tapping, I recognize the fact I don't have to do this all right now, and if I take it one at a time, I'm going to work my way through it, and I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to take action, which is great. And so then I get my head down, I do the next task, and the moment I finish that task, I look at my to-do list, and the overwhelm comes rushing back. That doesn't mean the tapping I did for overwhelm 35 minutes earlier before I started the previous task didn't work, because I reduced the overwhelm enough to successfully do a task. But now, as I come back to my to-do list, it's 35 minutes later. So I now have less time. Yes, there are less things on my to-do list because I crossed something off, but this is a new context. And so I am then going to tap again for overwhelm, and I do the next task. Now, as the day goes on, that overwhelm might start to gently decrease as there are fewer things on my to-do list. Or, because there's a ticking clock and all of this has to be done by 6 o'clock today, that overwhelm stays exactly the same. It might even go up a little bit as I get closer and closer to that deadline because that fear of not getting done becomes stronger. The tapping hasn't failed because every time I do an emotional first aid tapping for that overwhelm, I do what's happening next. So even though it feels like, and it's frustrating that I'm tapping on the same issue, I'm not. I'm tapping on the same emotion. But time has passed, The number of items on my to-do list has changed. Therefore, I'm in a new circumstance. And so as I relook at the list, I'm engaging with it in a new emotional way. So it's really important for us to recognize that sometimes there are things that we have to do over and over again. I ate breakfast today. And when we get done with this live stream, I'm going to eat lunch. That doesn't mean breakfast failed. And because of what is going on in my life, I have a very restricted diet this particular week because of a medical procedure that I have on Friday. Not only am I going to have to eat lunch, but my lunch and my dinner are going to be the exact same food. So there's not even variety inside of that. And when I sit down to dinner, I'm not cursing, oh, I can't believe I have to eat again. Eating again is part of the process. Like, it's just the rules. It's just how the system works. I have to sleep regularly. I have to drink water regularly. I have to move or my muscles atrophy regularly. And so sometimes as we're responding to these things, because of the nature of the issue, there is going to be some repeat that comes along inside of that. So that is idea number one that we want to keep in mind as we're engaging with this. We're beating ourselves up or we're feeling like the tool set is not working because we're doing the same thing again, and in reality, they're different. Okay. There's another way that these problems change and they become different. And that comes with, and this came up last night in our Art of Delivery class for the Tapping Mastery Academy, around the moment I feel safe being visible in a new place, my horizon immediately stretches and I see new opportunities for me to do something like that. So for example, let's use the issue of being in a circumstance where I want to speak in public. And so I'm afraid to speak in public. And so I tap and I tap and I tap and I tap. And all of a sudden I feel more comfortable speaking up. So in a meeting, I'm able to raise my hand and share a thought with the team. So what feels safe has expanded. But now that speaking up in the meeting feels safe, I might want to give a presentation and lead a conversation in the meeting. Well, now all of a sudden I'm afraid again. And again, same issue. I'm tapping on speaking up. So I tap and I tap and I tap, and now it feels comfortable for me to lead a discussion amongst my team. Then, as that becomes comfortable, there's a part of me that goes, ooh, if I give presentations, it will put me into leadership roles and it will give me more opportunity in the company. But now what has happened is I now want to be in a circumstance where I'm giving a presentation and not leading a discussion, which is a new issue, except for the fact I'm afraid to speak up. And so you can see what happens is that as the area that feels safe, so in the beginning, only being in my body at the meeting was safe. Then raising my hand and speaking up became safe. Then leading a discussion became safe. Then giving a presentation to my team became safe. And so what's happening inside of that is the space that feels comfortable is growing, but I happen to be living at the edge of the space that feels comfortable, looking over the fence going, I wonder if I can do this. I wonder what it feels like if I did that. And so when we're doing that, it can feel as if I'm tapping on the exact same issue. I'm tapping on the issue of not moving forward. I'm tapping on the issue of always being afraid to speak in public. Because what is always true in this analogy, if I imagine a yard that is growing that I feel safe in and there's a fence to it, even though the yard is growing, because I am looking further, I'm always right at the edge of the fence. So it always feels like that I'm stuck and I'm dealing with something like that. And so, again, even though it feels like it's the same issue, it's not the same issue. So we already have 3 different places where it feels like we're stuck, where we're not when we recognize it in that way. Okay. So number 1, when we're in a circumstance where the context of the issue is changing significantly. Number 2, when we're dealing with something where the emotion comes back again and again, like overwhelm or frustration or disappointment, because we're in new settings where that emotion is going to arise again. Number 3, as we're expanding where we are going, we always feel like we're at the edge. The 4th way where tapping feels like it's the same, and these overlap as we're knocking our way through this, is Oftentimes, I like to think of transformation as a spiral staircase. And so, as we are walking up a spiral staircase, if you ever look from above on someone who is walking up a spiral staircase, it looks like they're just walking in a circle. You know, if I just had you on a map and I had a GPS tracker on you as you were walking up a spiral staircase, it would just look like you're walking in a circle. Because you're passing from above, you're passing through the exact same points. But when we are walking up a spiral staircase, you know, this and this axis are exactly the same, but this one changes. So I'm passing through that point at a higher level. I'm passing through that point at a higher level. I'm passing through that point at a higher level. And so in some ways, this is very, very similar to the analogy with the fence I just gave, is that even though it feels like it's the same issue, I'm doing it at a different level. You know, oftentimes we have these stories that, you know, run our lives. Am I lovable? Am I capable? Am I acceptable? Like, these are the themes that come up over and over and over again. You know, one of the primary deep themes in my life is, am I using my giftedness, my time, and my resources effectively to what I feel like I'm called to do? Like, that is this question that has driven my life for, you know, the last 35 years. And so as I grow, as I expand, as I move up that healing spiral staircase, I keep bumping into those questions about whether or not I'm using my giftedness effectively. So again, it feels like it's the same issue because the name I'm giving it. And so in reality, every single thing that we've talked about so far is just a conversation about context. It's not just the thing that we're experiencing, but the space that we're experiencing within. Now, the last thing to consider as we're tapping on some things is, and this is unfortunate, but this is the truth, as wonderful and as magical as tapping is, there are certain things, either because of the limiting beliefs that we are carrying or because of the limitations of the tool set, doesn't do everything that we want it to do. You know, water is really, really good for me. Water is a necessity for me, but I can't just live on water. I need to be consuming other things into my body. And food is really, really good for me. And I can consume food all the time, and that is not an appropriate substitute for water. And so sometimes when we are approaching something that we want deep, lasting transformation about, and we come back to it again and again, part of the struggle is the limitation of the tool set. Now, when we encounter that, the idea is not, well, it doesn't work for this thing the way I want it to, and we storm away, but instead, how can we emotionally engage with that thing? So I might have a persistent health issue that I can't overcome, or I haven't found a way to overcome it yet, and it feels like the tapping is in vain because these steep coming back again and again. What I am going to use the tool set for is, what can I tap on if it's not going to create transformation? And the things I can tap on are my emotional response to the fact that I'm stuck, the fact it keeps coming back and again, the fact that it feels like it's out of control, the fact that it feels like tapping isn't working the way that I want. And so the tapping becomes a useful tool in responding to the problem, even if it's not completely solving the problem. And so one question that's really important and vital for us to ask is, when it feels like tapping isn't working, is to ask ourselves, great, what are other aspects or other entryways that I can have into this? And for me, the entryway is almost always, and how do I feel about that in the moment? And so when I have clarity around that particular piece of it, it makes it so much easier to engage with this to create change and transformation. So context is super important when we're trying to understand whether or not we're tapping on the same thing again, and we're tapping on the same thing again, or if we're actually in a different place and it's just rhyming and it's feel like we're again. The last bit I think is really, really useful is, and we've talked about this before, but giving ourselves permission to be of two minds. You know, so often we're like, well, I'm of two minds. I don't know if I should choose A or if I should choose B. That's hard. But other times, being of two minds is really, really useful. You know, I can appreciate what I have and I can want better. And so oftentimes when I am engaging with tapping and I'm going, I'm tapping on the same issue over and over and over again, what I'm not doing is I'm not recognizing even if it's small, even if it's incremental, progress that I'm making around the issue. And there's this internal tension that if I start to appreciate where I've come, there's a part of me that's afraid that I'm going to stop striving and I'm going to stop trying to make it better because I'm going to become complacent inside of that. And on the other mind, if I'm constantly pushing forward, it's really easy for me not to recognize the progress that I have been making as I am engaging with this. And so when I feel like I'm tapping on the same issue over and over and over and over again, it's good for me to recognize, okay, great. When have I tapped on this issue before? And how has it provided relief? Not total relief, not instant relief, not eternal relief, but how has it provided some relief for me? And I'm not satiated, and I'm not satisfied, and I'm not done. Again, just appreciating that does not demotivate me to take action and keep working on the issue. But instead, what it does is it helps me to recognize it's like, oh, I am moving forward. It is a little easier, and I'm still frustrated and disappointed and overwhelmed and in pain because the thing is still here. I can be both of those things simultaneously. That's the moment where being of two minds as a human serves us really well. So, if you're in a circumstance where you are feeling stuck, the two things that I would encourage you to do is number one, tap on all of the emotions around feeling stuck. Tap on all of the emotions around feeling let down by tapping or let down by your system or let down where it works for everybody else and it doesn't work for me. So whatever emotions you have around your stuckness, that is the place we start. The second thing we do is we go and we name the incremental, small, stepwise victories that we have had as we are still working on this process consistently. Because it's easier for me to stay motivated if I can notice the change. I go, okay, great. It made a difference last time. And again, difference might be small. You know, when I'm tapping for overwhelm, the overwhelm goes away for 97 seconds. But in 97 seconds, if I can start the next task, I just get focused on the next task and I forget about my to-do list. And so it's okay if the overwhelm comes rushing back 37 minutes later when I look back at my to-do list to do the next thing. Because I'm in a circumstance where I was successful, I took an action. I was successful because I diminished the pain some. You know, one of the things that happens is we get these, when we have success, we start to grow our expectations for tapping and how happiness is outcome divided by expectation. Years and years and years ago, I was very, very new to tapping. This is in the first 18 months that I was exposed to tapping. And I was in a coffee shop in Costa Rica while I was on vacation, and some other American tourists came in. And so we were just swapping resources and stories and stuff like that. And the group of 4 people who came and sat down had just done the zip lining through the rainforest. I'm like, ooh, that sounds really cool. How was it? And they're like, oh, it was really great. And one of the guys, yeah, it was fun, but I kind of tweaked my back. You know, you got to be careful. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know the most amazing thing ever. Let me show you this really amazing thing. So we did. I was like, 0 to 10, how big is the pain? And he's like, it's a 6. I'm like, awesome. And we do some tapping on the pain in his back and the pain in his back and the pain in his back. And he finishes tapping. And I go, great. 0 to 10, how big is it now? And he goes, it's a 4. And in my head, I'm going, oh, it failed. And him and his 3 friends go, whoa. Because tapping for 90 seconds on your body and having a 33% diminishment of the pain in your body, that's a pretty major victory. Except for the fact for those of us who have our expectations transformed because of the success that we've had in the past. And so it's important for me to remind myself and to reground myself in the incremental steps along the way. So, high level. Oftentimes when it feels like we're tapping on the exact same issue, what we're actually doing is we're tapping on an issue that has the same label, but the contextual elements of it are so different that it makes sense that it is a new issue. The way that we face that, the way we step into that is number one, we tap for any of the emotions that we're feeling about the progress not going as well as we'd like. And number two, tune in and notice the incremental progress that we've had along the way, appreciate that and celebrate that, because that's going to provide motivation for you to keep moving forward. Oh, this small step made a difference. Oh, I have one more thing crossed off my to-do list. Oh, I'm one step closer to achieving that goal. And that's going to make it so much easier for you. So those are some thoughts about when it feels like we are stuck and we're tapping on the same issue over and over again. Quick reminder, just look at our calendar right here. Next week, we're going to be back here to talk on how to tap with compassion. It's going to transform the way that you tap. How to create emotional momentum is what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. And then, bookmarks, tappingpodcast.com. We got a really, really awesome podcast coming out tomorrow that you're not going to want to miss. Tapping on when we feel numb and we don't know how to do anything. If you go to tappingpodcast.com, you can see the entire archive. If you'd like to join us in the Tapping Mastery Academy, we're doing a class on visibility again this Sunday at noon. If you just go to tappingqa.com/TMA, you'll get all of the details, and you can find the entire playlist of all of these live streams. Again, this is episode 33. We've been going at this for more than half a year. You can find all of the replays at WednesdaysWithGene.com. Awesomeness. Well, thanks for hanging out with me here. If you joined us live, if you're watching the replay after the fact, I super appreciate it. If you are watching this after the fact on the screen right now, you can see a link to the playlist of all the past episodes of Wednesdays with Gene. I hope you have an awesome day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next Wednesday. Have a great day. Bye-bye.